Fed Chair Jerome Powell is investigated by the DOJ. President Trump declares no more oil for Cuba, and a U-Haul plows into an anti-Iran protest in Los Angeles. I'm Georgia Howe with Daily Wire Executive Editor John Bickley. It's Monday, January 12th, and this is Evening Wire.
The DOJ has opened a criminal investigation into Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell. The federal probe centers on Powell's testimony regarding the renovations at the Federal Reserve Building, which have gone way over budget. Powell confirmed the probe last night, accusing the Trump administration of using the threat of prosecution to pressure the central bank into lowering interest rates. He called the investigation an unprecedented challenge to the Fed's independence, insisting monetary policy must be guided by economic conditions, not political demands.
I have served at the Federal Reserve under 4 administrations, Republicans and Democrats alike. In every case, I have carried out my duties without political fear or favor, focused solely on our mandate of price stability and maximum employment. Public service sometimes requires standing firm in the face of threats. I will continue to do the job the Senate confirmed me to do, with integrity and a commitment to serving the American people.
Meanwhile, the White House said the president did not call for the investigation into Powell and that he knew nothing about it.
President Trump has declared that Cuba will get no more oil or money from Venezuela, while urging Havana to make a deal before it's too late. Daily Wire senior editor Cabot Phillips has more.
The president's message follows the U.S. military-led capture of Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro and a strict American blockade of Venezuelan oil shipments, which has effectively cut off Caracas's longtime energy lifeline to Cuba. Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel responded by rejecting U.S. threats, insisting that his country is, quote, free, independent, and sovereign, and prepared to defend itself. The move underscores how the dramatic shift in Venezuela's political landscape is now pulling Havana into the spotlight, threatening to deepen an already severe energy and economic crisis on the island, and raising the stakes for U.S.-Cuba relations.
The president is scheduled to meet tomorrow with key officials to assess next steps with Iran, amid reports that its regime has killed thousands of protesters. Daily Wire political reporter Cameron Arkin reports.
Officials told the Wall Street Journal that the United States response could include, quote, boosting anti-government sources online, deploying secretive cyber weapons against Iranian military and civilian sites, placing more sanctions on the regime, and military strikes. Among those expected to be at the meeting are Secretary of State Marco Rubio, War Secretary Pete Hegseth, and Joint Chiefs Chair General Dan Kane. Speaking about the meeting Sunday, the president said that they're looking at, quote, some very strong options in response to Iran's tyrannical government. If Iran should target American troops, he said, we will hit them at levels that they've never been hit before.
Chaos broke out at an anti-Iranian regime demonstration in Los Angeles on Sunday when a U-Haul slammed into the massive crowd. Daily Wire reporter Zach Jewell has more.
Around 3,000 people gathered in Westwood Sunday afternoon to protest the tyrannical Iranian government. But at around 3:40 p.m., a large U-Haul truck with a series of political statements written on the side drove into the crowd. The statements included, quote, no Shah, no regime, USA don't repeat 1953, no mullah. The protesters quickly swarmed the truck and pulled the driver out. 2 demonstrators suffered minor injuries and the driver was hospitalized for unspecified injuries. Officials say he's expected to face charges of attempted assault with a deadly weapon. An investigation is ongoing.
Following the fatal shooting of Renee Good in Minneapolis, the radical Ice Watch organization she was working with is pushing to get even more activists onto the streets. Daily Wire immigration reporter Jenny Terr has the story.
On Saturday, thousands of anti-ICE activists participated in a church training in Roseville, Minnesota, where they were encouraged to annoy agents like, quote, mosquitoes. The group running the training session, Monarca, has scheduled 6 trainings since the shooting, all of which they say are at capacity. One of the local Minneapolis Ice Watch groups, known as Defend the 612, held a training the day after the shooting for anyone who wants to learn how to plug in and for those who have already been in the streets and can share lessons from that experience. The group also organized a protest Friday night that later grew violent as rioters broke into a local hotel where they believed ICE agents were staying in Minneapolis.
Among all the footage streaming in from anti-ICE protests and riots over the last few days, one has gained particular attention. Footage of an activist mob hounding and then chasing the Minneapolis police, including their chief, out of an area. During the footage, activists are seen screaming directly in the faces of officers trying to escort a police vehicle out of a crowded area Friday night. The mob gets more and more hostile while the officers start picking up their pace to get out of there. Meanwhile, Homeland Security is not running away. Secretary Noem said Sunday that hundreds more federal agents are being dispatched to the city.
We're sending more officers today and tomorrow. They'll arrive. There'll be hundreds more. And in order to allow our ICE and our Border Patrol individuals that are working in Minneapolis to do so safely, we're going to continue to, if they conduct violent activities against law enforcement, if they impede our operations, that's a crime, and we will hold them accountable to those consequences.
Can states keep men out of women's sports? The Supreme Court will hear oral arguments tomorrow on that issue. The cases brought by Idaho and West Virginia will determine whether states have the authority to separate athletics by biological sex. Women's sports advocate Riley Gaines spoke today at a press conference in support of the girls involved.
I've sat in legislative bodies where we've heard Democratic elected officials who say, look, this is just a solution in search of a problem. You know, we're just talking about middle school girls basketball. It doesn't really matter that much. Sports aren't really about winning. They're about happiness. We are fighting for the bare minimum here. The bare minimum. Can we as women call ourselves champions? Can we allow ourselves to be vulnerable in an intimate area of undressing, such as a locker room, without having to fear a man walking into that space? Can we do those things?
The United Arab Emirates has withdrawn support for its citizens to study abroad in the UK. The UAE government cites the, quote, risk of radicalization as the reason for the change, including the UK's tolerance for the Muslim Brotherhood. The Brotherhood, which multiple Middle Eastern countries have designated a terrorist organization, is suspected of infiltrating multiple prominent Muslim groups in the British Isles. In the 2023-2024 school year, 70 students across UK universities were reported to the government's de-radicalization program. This is nearly double the year prior. In response to the growing pressure, Prime Minister Keir Starmer's administration said the matter was, quote, under review.
Mississippi's oldest synagogue caught fire over the weekend in a suspected arson attack. Here's Daily Wire reporter Lyndon Blake with more.
The incident took place in Jackson on Saturday morning shortly after 3 a.m. The Beth Israel Congregation building was empty and no one was harmed in the fire. An unarmed suspect is in custody, though, for arson, though officials have not released details on the motive or classified the fire as a hate crime. The fire destroyed 2 Torahs entirely and damaged 5 others, but one Torah that survived through the Holocaust and was encased in glass was unharmed in the blaze. The fire also caused extensive damage to the synagogue's Tree of Life, library, and administrative offices. This specific synagogue is no stranger to controversy, as the KKK bombed it during the 1960s. Jackson Mayor John Horn condemned Saturday's incident, saying, quote, acts of anti-Semitism, racism, and religious hatred are incompatible with the values of the city.
The Heritage Foundation is warning that the breakdown of the American family is dangerously close to a point of no return. The think tank's president, Kevin Roberts, elaborated on Fox News.
It's no surprise that since the nuclear family has deteriorated, that we've seen the degradation, not just of the American governmental system, as you said, a post-constitutional order, but we've also seen the degradation of culture, of morality.
Heritage said the decline is, quote, not inevitable, but the result of policy choices. The foundation recently released a report advocating for a series of policy changes, which they call a culture-wide Manhattan Project. These policies would promote a higher birth rate and proper family building, such as a $2,500 investment account for every newborn, tax credits for families with more kids, and the creation of marriage boot camps. Other policies would safeguard children's mental development, discouraging online dating, and banning social media and certain AI chatbots for kids younger than 16.
British media tycoon Jimmy Lai appeared in a Hong Kong court today to request a lenient sentence for his national security charges. Staunch supporters have been queued up since Friday outside the courthouse in anticipation of the hearing. Lai was found guilty last month in a landmark national security trial where he was convicted of conspiracy and sedition against the CCP. Lai founded Apple Daily, a prominent Hong Kong newspaper known for its pro-democracy stance and its critical reporting on the CCP. Lai has been held in solitary confinement for the last 18 months while he serves time for other lesser charges brought by the government. He now faces up to life in prison for the sedition charges.
Bob Weir, the co-founder and baritone vocalist behind the band The Grateful Dead, has passed away. Daily Wire DC Bureau Chief Tim Rice has more on Weir's life.
Weir was 78 years old when he died on Saturday following a brief battle with cancer. According to Weir's family, he, quote, transitioned peacefully surrounded by loved ones. The singer wrote or co-wrote a number of the Grateful Dead's iconic songs, including Sugar Magnolia, Jack Straw, Mexicali Blues, and Playing in the Band. Weir received his cancer diagnosis in July and began treatment just before performing in a series of shows commemorating the anniversary of the Grateful Dead's founding. His final performance with the band was fittingly Touch of Grey, a 1987 song about coming to terms with growing old. Weir is survived by his wife Natasha and their two daughters, Monet and Chloe.
And tragic news out of the Golden Globes as Morning Wire, the #1 ranking show in the hearts of all true Americans, was snubbed for the Best Podcast Award. The award instead went to Amy Poehler for her show Good Hang. The Hollywood Foreign Press introduced the Best Podcast Award this year in an effort to recognize creators beyond the scope of traditional Hollywood media. The only problem is they gave the award to a show where a Hollywood insider interviews other Hollywood insiders. We're not mad, we're just disappointed.
Those are your drive home updates this evening. To learn more about these stories, go to dailywire.com. And in case you missed it earlier today, we covered some major stories, including anti-ICE protests spread. President Trump considers his options as Iranian protesters feel the force of the regime. And is Cuba now in the president's crosshairs? Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back tomorrow morning with another full edition of Morning Wire.